Hello, all to all our viewers from around the world, all our buyers who have joined in, and exhibitors from India, governments, and all stakeholders. Thank you so much for joining on the side on to the leadership panel for tourism, and we are coming back now with yet another exciting session. This one is on the heritage of India, and we have absolutely wonderful panel set up for you. I'm Ashish, the consultancy of faith. The whole concept is to build a narrative of how we can leverage these trends of the country and taking tourism forward by building on the voices of some of the best and the most vocal industry experts. So I will hand over the panel to Randhir, who is the president of Indian Heritage Hotel Association. Randhir, thank you very much. Best of luck, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. It is indeed a privilege for me to moderate this informative session on the untold story of the Indian cultural heritage. This session will provide a platform for exchange ideas, rich cultural heritage of this country, the potential of which is unparalleled to anything. As you know, we have 6 eminent panelists here with us. I shall be addressing a question each in turn to all of you. Our first panelist is Mr. Aman Nath. Aman is chairman. He's the chairman and the founder of the Nimrana Group of Hotels. He also has the distinction of being appointed as Chevalier of the Nation Order of the Legion of Honor, the highest French order of merit amongst the military and civil awards established in 1802 by Napoleon Bonaparte. Aman Nath.
Delighted to be here. Are we answering questions or are we talking actually?
No, you're talking, sorry. Can I just ask you a thing?
Okay.
You are among the few who were not born into the property or properties you run. Your story is very different from most of us. Would you like to share some lesser known aspects of Nimrana's story?
Well, actually, I believe that heritage is the onus of all the citizens of India and not necessarily of those who were born into it, especially since the privy purses were removed and we took a socialist form of government. So it's not fair to expect the custodians of heritage to have to maintain it without the wherewithal that it required to run these properties. So we have now, I think, evolved and matured as a nation and learned to appreciate the role of everybody in society, those who are born into extraordinary palaces are not guilty of having been born there, and those who are not born in those properties are also, not. We cannot wash our hands off from looking after our heritage. So if I feel that we play the role from the other side, that when you see ruined properties which have an extraordinary potential, that it is absolutely necessary for us to want to do something with them. So Nimrana began very innocently in 1986, and it has gone on by its success and by the passion to expand into areas wherever people found us properties which were in ruin and which we thought were doable. We also opened many regions where people never thought that there would be tourists. Even the flagship Nimrana was just a splendid ruin on the National Highway 8 between Delhi and Jaipur. And many people passed it, many had visited it. And after it was purchased, I never stopped meeting people, industrialists. In fact, Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy, the Gandhis, many people had visited it, hoping to do something with it. But it was such an impossible ruin, and the scale of it defied any doing, really. So when I took it upon myself to do this, not even being an architect, Many architects who came to see it later said you were able to do it precisely because you were not an architect, because then you would have been aware of the madness you were getting into. Because education is also a way of boxing your thoughts into a restricted space. So if you get into, jump into the water and learn to swim, that's also one way. And we've enjoyed that greatly. And we've, I think, transformed many people's lives. Many hundreds and thousands of people have lived off Nimrana. Many traditional crafts have been revived. And today, when the gardens are laid in that ruin, because we are able to pump waters up the hill and so on, we get the best of both worlds, the past and the present. Is that enough, or do I need to speak more? Randhir is...
Thanks, Aman. Absolutely brilliant. You really hit the points. You right to the point here. Because you're the custodian, the heritage properties, everyone has an opportunity. And what you really made of the opportunity which you got was absolutely remarkable. You showed a new direction to the heritage preservation. In fact, you're one of the leaders into this, because you started with absolute ruins. You see your property in Tejara. Nobody would dare to touch it. A very good example of how you created that. Nimrana, I've been with you myself. A horse could ride through those cracks. Absolutely. And you dare to even venture into it. Great, Aman. Great show.
Thank you.
And with that, I move on to our next speaker. That's M.K. Lakshraj Singh, Mewad of Udaipur. Lakshraj is the executive director of the HRH group of hotels. Lakshraj, what are the important factors that you feel are holding together the cultural heritage of India?
Hello and good evening to everyone. And first and foremost, I'm very thankful to be on this August panel and this gathering that is there. Certainly something that will enrich my resume as well. So thank you once again for thinking me worthy and having me on this wonderful panel. So coming to the point, I think there are three major things that kind of tie this whole thing down together. One is language, which we feel that is sometimes not given enough importance to, because this is a very important intangible side of heritage that we really need to kind of talk about and be a part of. We almost always end up thinking as heritage to be predominantly stone, bricks, structure, walls, things that you can touch and feel. But we never look beyond that at times. So I certainly feel that the intangible heritage is certainly something which is very, very important, within which I say that language is something which is very important as an example. The second thing is our culinary cuisines, our culinary sets that exist from Kanyakumari to Kashmir and from west to east as well. So those are other things that I feel are great binders as well. And the third thing is weddings and alliances. Now, these are things that are factors that are holding together our cultural heritage, because these three things, some of them being exceptionally intangible, certain things being a part of tradition and something that you can touch and feel. So these three things that I have broken down and I feel that are exceptionally important, which is still keeping all of this together. So be it even the young, they are still passionate, involved in all of this and trying to keep this alive. You see a lot of young getting involved into the culinary side of things, getting into food, trying to understand, doing a lot of research, getting ahead with all of that. And other things, I think weddings are still certain things that people celebrate with a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of pomp and show. So I think these are sort of things that are only taking forward, enhancing, keeping things together, tied down, knitted together. So these are the three predominant broader aspects that I still feel are very, very strong even today. There could be a lot of other things, but these certainly three things that keep people together.
Thank you, Lakshraj.
Pleasure.
You've rightly said that the intangible heritage is very important. The remarkable weddings which you people do, you've really opened the wedding market to the world, destination weddings. The Udaipur family has done something very, very remarkable. And
It's been a great effort over a period of time. I think earlier it was not something that people really looked upon it as a great thing, but since the late 80s and early 90s, and then today, the entire evolution, earlier people were reacting to all of this. Now people are responding to all of this. So I think that has been the change that has come through during this entire process and the journey of 1,000 miles that began with the first step. I think this has been a takeaway from this, that every time earlier when these concepts came in, there was a lot of reactions. Now there are responses, so that has created an opportunity and a harmony for conversations to come in. A lot of markets, a lot of people, and a lot of business opportunities now have come up. So this has also given a lot of space for tradition and culture to thrive as well. So people now want to know the right thing to do. What are the procedures? What are the ceremonies? How are they done correctly? So at least there is a lot of educational value through the young that go through this when these processes actually come in. And these are things that I've experienced over the time that I have been here. And you can see the passion that exists in people to be able to know more and more about their culture.
very, very true. I absolutely agree with what you have said. And having said that, let me take us to the next speaker, Mr. Steve Bogier. He is the chairman and managing director of the Indico Leisure Hotels. He is also the vice president of the Indian Heritage Hotel Association. And along with that, he has a lot of things. He's on preservation and ecotourism, a big factor on ecotourism. Steve, can I request you to please share with us, many nations in the world, India is primarily a cultural heritage zone, and a prime one of that. The culture we are talking about is alive, even at this date, in the life and lifestyles of every Indian. What do you have to share with us on this?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. The very title of this seminar is very strange, because after 74 years of independence, we are talking about heritage and culture. It's a big secret, but it is sad. I have three issues to table today. One is, I strongly believe it's everybody's responsibility to conserve and preserve, but it's been a big battle for those individuals who attempted on those feats. I think today, after so many years of battling, I should table the point that the government has been of very little help. As late as a couple of months ago, there was a raid in one of my heritage hotels by the forest department. Strangely, they said, "What are all these trophies doing here?" What trophies? Oh, I didn't even recognize them as trophies. In South India, we have a habit of placing a deer horn at the entry point of our homes, the palaces. At every point, we believe reptiles are kept outside the house when you have a deer horn at the entrance. So for hundreds of years, these have been sticking there. We even forget there's a trophy there. They've become a part and parcel of that wall. They said, "These are all banned. We should remove it." I said, "Why? Then who gives me safety if snakes enter my property?" They said, "No, it's banned. 1972 Act, ta 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 ta." And they removed all the horns, everything, all the deer horns. And I believe they did it in palaces, in other places. When I questioned this with the chief wildlife warden in Delhi, he says, "Here's an act." Yes, there can be an act, but how does it help today to remove all these trophies? Imagine our palaces without these trophies today. I mean, then what's the difference between a 7-star luxury hotel and a palace? These trophies are not made today. They were made 200 years, 500 years ago. They're not shot today. So I am denying a certain part of the heritage, the natural heritage, to the future trustees. What do I say? I talk about the royals, I talk about their hunting ability, I talk how they stuff, how beautifully they exhibited. A part of the heritage is lost. I think in the last 100 years, no other country has smashed its heritage, given up on its culture, changed its lifestyle, totally damaging the natural heritage. I think this is one factor. The second factor is, I think India has failed to marry the cultural heritage, the natural heritage, and the built heritage together. All of them stand alone and stand apart. I think the life and the opportunity comes alive when these are married. Think of the number of heritage buildings that are standing alone. After 6 in the evening, they're all dead. Visitors are not allowed. Da, 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 da. No, even for getting a sound and light show into a palace or into a heritage building, ASI doesn't permit. It's a big battle. So I think this is the second factor. The third factor is I must appreciate the heritage hotel owners for having taken the bull by its horn and built these beautiful hotels, preserved them, conserved them, struggled with the government, struggled with the local people, and made heritage hotels in remote parts, especially the rural areas. One, it created economy, rural economic development. It became a big tool. Two, it preserved a great heritage. But for these hotels, how do people even go to these locations? They cannot, because there will be no facility. This not only developed our rural belts, it also preserved. And finally, it is the heritage that is a major pull factor world over for India. But unfortunately, we got stuck to Delhi, Agra, Jaipur. We never bothered about so much of heritage that is strewn all over the country. I think the next decade, our concentration should be to marry the three: natural heritage, cultural heritage, and built heritage, and two, to recognize the other part of the heritage that is ignored and bring them to the forefront and make India a very sprawling tourism country through niche tourism. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I can understand your pain and dismay at the lack of efforts till now in heritage preservation. Your story about the removal of trophies is a sad thing. And I think somebody should take a cue from this. Moving on, I'd like to invite Mr. Vinod Daniel, who is the chair of the OS Heritage and board member of the International Council of Museums. Vinod has been involved with a lot of these things. And Vinod, tell me, cultural heritage conservation, getting it right and sustainable, what do you say on that? You're on this thing, mute.
Thank you very much, Randir, for this opportunity. And I think it's great to be in this August gathering. I mean, it's a delight to join online. It was a privilege to be there at your conference a few years back. I might indulge on two aspects. One is I want to throw a little bit of a background on this whole thing. And then after that, I've got three very quick points to make. Now, preserving cultural heritage is an important anchor for the global tourism industry. I think it's great Mr. Lakshiraj Singh already mentioned about the intangible, because cultural heritage includes the intangible, like the aspects he beautifully mentioned. It includes the tangible, which includes all those buildings and monuments, but also includes the natural heritage, which includes culturally significant landscapes and biodiversity. Now, heritage assets contribute to sustainable economic development and prosperity by providing landmarks that serve as economic development foci and community touchstones. They provide important tourism drawcards in urban centers and regional areas. They assist Small scale and short stay regional tourism, such as local bed and breakfast businesses, small art and craft galleries, and open garden schemes. They attract people and investment by enhancing the amenity or livability of towns and cities. They create proportionally more jobs than new construction and providing better local expenditure retention. Now, in terms of cultural tourism, UNWTO estimates that more than 50% of tourists worldwide are now motivated by a desire to experience a country's culture and heritage. And according to UNWTO, their 2012 global survey, they expect this to increase by 15% year on year in terms of numbers. Now, something like this helps the local communities financially. In terms of employment, just in Europe, close to 4% of both employment and GDP is created by the cultural sector. They say in India, about 7.9% employment is created by the sector. Something like this helps you to differentiate one city from the other. And in a nutshell, as a traveler who's been to many different countries, they say it's economically good for a city since business travelers often spend one extra night in the city if the city has quite a bit to offer. Now, I'll make three very quick points on what could be done. This is again from a global context. The first part is in terms of preserving this, in terms of preserving especially the built heritage, we need to have a very clear charter for India. There is a Venice Charter, which is a guiding charter that was done in 1964. Many countries have gone ahead and made their own charters. For example, Australia has got a Bharat Charter. And what it does with the Bharat Charter is it's developed a conservation management plan principle. Before they work on any building, this becomes a guideline for them in terms of what they can do in restoring the building, in terms of its significance, in terms of all its background, making sure health and safety is kept in mind, making sure handicap access is kept in mind. And it's very important that such a charter is done. The second bit is in terms of the legal protection of cultural property. Now, again, in an environment with limited resources, regulation may appear attractive because it appears relatively costly. Governments can simply require someone to do something. That may be the reason that regulation has traditionally been the predominant conservation tool in some countries, including Australia. However, an effective heritage system is found on the balance of sticks and carrots. The lack of a meaningful level of carrots undermines support from property owners for the system, making regulation more difficult and misses opportunities for garnering private investment. Specifically, the purpose of these incentives that need to come as part of the legislation could be ensure that owners are not fully disadvantaged or unduly disadvantaged by the constraints or extra expense that the regulatory system may impose, leverage private capital investment in conservation, generate additional conservation activity that would otherwise occur, counteract land use policies or other government programs that threaten heritage places, and ensure that as far as possible, a level playing field exists between restoration work and new construction. Now, these incentives can be such as income tax credits or rebates for conservation work performed by tax-paying individuals or corporations. This is something that a country like India can think of. It exists in countries like the US, France, Austria, Germany, Australia. It ranges from 20%, sometimes even up to 100%. That 100% may be over a 10-year span. So something like this would be a very, very strong incentive. And my third and very last point is, I think by doing all this, you'll also develop a very skilled human resource force, because this third aspect is also missing in this country. If you want to do meaningful restoration work, it's very hard to find people who really understand and get it done the right way. But the third thing is an offshoot of the first two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod. You're right that intangible heritage is as important as tangible heritage, that increasingly more people are interested in cultural tourism now, has rightly been highlighted by you. Thank you so much. Now, can I'd like to request Mr. York. Those is not coming, so I'll request York, founder and director of Malabar Escapes.
Shall I start?
Yeah, York, I just wanted to ask you that the living heritage of Fort Cochin and its twin Mettacheri, you're right in the heart of Fort Cochin, which is a very important part. Would you like to share something with us on this?
Yes, I would like to. So, hello everybody. My background is obviously different from the other co-panelists. I came to India as a visitor. It became a lifelong passion. I made it my home, and I started a heritage hotel there. I want to talk about the living heritage of Fort Cochin and its twin Matanjari, and then how 500 years of its heritage are reflected in the design and the operation of the Malabar House. Cochin Natural Port was formed in the 14th century. Arabs came for trading, so did the Chinese, followed by the Portuguese. The Cochin Rajas gave Fort Cochin to the Portuguese around 1500 as a trading post for the pepper export, hailed as a beginning of maritime global trade. The Portuguese were followed by the Dutch and British, with the Arab, Chinese, and European ships mooring the people with their cultures and tasted disembarked in the port. They mingled over centuries with the different communities living in the 5 square kilometer heritage zone of Fort Cochin and Matanjari. Their communal interaction created a unique living heritage, and living heritage is defined by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage, referring to social practice, knowledge, skills, handed down over generations. After this brief phase with the historical background, let me come to my own lifelong interaction and fascination with the place. It was a late evening about 50 years ago that I was dropped at the bridge connecting Wellington Island, the modern port of Fort Cochin, with the heritage zone. And being young, I shouldered my suitcase and I walked all the way to Fort Cochin and checked into a lodge in the Dutch Heritage Building, at that time the only
Yeah.
Maybe you can reconnect with later. Thank you.
Thanks. I was just wondering, Aman, can I start with you? Can we just, you were the first history-conscious hotelier whom we've had, who put centuries on your properties. What were you thinking was the base of this thing? You have properties from 14th century to the 21st century. You're on mute, Aman. You're on mute. Aman, unmute yourself.
Okay. Is it better? Is it all right now?
Yeah.
Okay. I said, when you market yourself, you have to put your strengths forward. And our past is so glorious, so rich, and nothing that we should be ashamed of at any level, even though governments have their own ways of interpreting these things. So time is something you cannot buy. The past is something you cannot buy into the future. So if you've got a 14th century building, which is older than the founding of America and so on, then we should flaunt it. So when we started restoring buildings, we realized that we'd got into the 16th century in Tranquebar and 15th century at Nimrana. And there's so much more waiting to be done that was one way to market the tourism, to say that you walk back into a time machine and you can wake up in a 700-year-old building or a 600-year-old building or a 500-year-old building. But even as I answer the question, I do want to say one thing about all the speakers who have spoken before us, that what Steve said was particularly relevant, and it gives me great pain to think that we have a government that has nothing positive on his agenda to do than to hound people, because we also took a property in Coorg, which belonged to the Prime Minister of the Rajas of Coorg, and it had trophies, hunting trophies, of which we were totally unaware. And he was a paralyzed gentleman in need of money. We restored the place, we ran the place, and one fine day they come and give us warrants of arrest. And now the two people, one was Francis, one was Mr. Chengappa, are no longer in this world. But I still have a warrant of arrest for trophies which were shot by the grandparents of the owners of the family. So I think that the mindset of the government has to change. It cannot be a colonial mindset in which they are hounding the citizens, because the laws are made in the wrong sort of way. Yeah, that was an aside, but it was important, I think, to say that. And when we are talking also of doing more things in this country. I, for example, have grown up a lot in Jammu and Kashmir in all my childhood. Every summer we spent 2 months in different parts. We would set up home and so on. And ever since the the Prime Minister has made a call, when the 370 has been removed, I'm dying to do things in Kashmir. The government is dying to have people to do, but who do you talk to? There is no connect. There are not many people who would want to put their money and energy into a state which they think is troubled or could be troubled. And here we are, but we are not able to do this. So I think that one of the things of this tourism conference or Zoom webinar that we are having should be some positive takes on this. That if somebody wants to do this, Ashish, you could look into this, that you could be, you're the right people, you know everything. I keep saying faith is better equipped than any minister or any ministry to talk about tourism in the country. Why are you not consulted? Why are you not making these and then going to the ministers so that you know where heritage stands, where the royalty stands? Nobody needs to be persecuted and flogged even today. There should be very open, clear policies, so that everybody feels good about doing whatever they are doing in this. Yeah. I've more than answered your question. Sorry about that.
There's a lot that future hoteliers can learn from you, Aman, about marketing one's strengths. Your point on the government hounding hoteliers is a very valid one, which needs to be taken as a point. Thank you so much. Now, can I move on to Mr. Daniel?
I'm here. Sorry.
You back? Okay, great. Sorry, Mr. Yeah, okay, you come.
Yeah, sorry, my internet connection is completely dropped. I'm connecting via the mobile phone.
Okay.
Would you like me to carry on where I stopped, and then they can patch it together, or?
Yeah, they'll do that. You can continue.
Right. Yeah, I just carry on where I stopped. Yeah, I walked through the narrow by lanes with their Dutch houses and roads lined with British colonial bungalows, stopped at the parade ground with its amazing shade trees to see kids playing cricket and football, and returned finally to the lodge to rent a room for a month. I had reached my destination. It is only 5 minutes walk from today's Malabar House. Living for a month in Fort Cochin, I discovered Matanjari with its centuries-old temples, mosques, and churches, all living hubs for their community. I was fascinated by Jewtown, with the oldest synagogue of the Commonwealth, again a symbol of communal harmony. I followed the smell into the huge spice warehouses along the waterfront of Bassa Road. I met people and made friends, which became lifelong friendships for life. In 1994, my kids were grown up, and my wife and I decided to take up a new challenge by moving to Cochin. Nothing seemed to have changed. The place looked frozen in time. We found the Malabar House, a boarded up British colonial bungalow owned by a bank. When we bought Malabar House, the bank gave us a complete file with all the previous sales deeds, starting with a handwritten Dutch document from 1754. In the 19th century, it was home of the British port captain and in the 20th century home of traders and bankers. In 1995, we started the project of the conversion of this history-rich building into a heritage hotel. We concluded on some principles for our design work. First, you cannot preserve cultural heritage by avoiding the present and ignoring the future. Therefore, we work on a synergy between the multi-layered local heritage and designed interaction and innovation. Second, to achieve this, we respect the architectural vocabulary of the Malabar House and Fort Cochin and work with local materials and craftsmen on crafted solutions. And finally, third, we commit ourselves to sustainable and ecological solutions. The ever-present tropical climate allows you to create indoor private worlds and outdoor communal spaces offering the guests social interaction, culinary experiences, and cultural performances. Our carefully curated collection of genuine art and antique furniture, together with the handcrafted design, tells their stories here and now in the present, avoiding fake history. Walking through Malabar House is a journey showcasing past and present craftsmanship and giving the inherited skills, patronage, and future. After 14 months of renovation, the Malabar House opened with a team of people who are themselves part of the living heritage through their knowledge and skills. Started by us, Fort Cochin story went on. Today, Fort Cochin is a heritage magnet with one of the highest concentrations of heritage boutique hotels and homestays in the country. Our continuous quest for innovation never stopped. We won awards and became 2007 the first indie member for Venice Charter, the world's finest chain of small boutique hotels. Together with Purity, our backwater resort, we work on a basket of locally rooted experiences, whether it's Ayurveda or culinary journeys based on local produce, the patronage and interaction with local artists, and opening for our guests doors to a surrounding world. I hope this has given you a glimpse of Fort Cochin and what we are doing. For me, the place is home. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, York. So nice of you. Your story has been indeed fascinating about the Malabar House. It is inspiring the way, and you have gone into, puts the cultural heritage of Cochin together. Thank you. Can I just take Steve? Steve, can I just put on a question for you? In the last 100 years, so much of traditions have been lost, culture smashed, and heritage have gone unpreserved. Who's responsible for this anyhow? That's for Steve.
I think there's been some sense of irresponsibility from the public for natural heritage, but built heritage, the blame purely goes to the government. Not only the blame, there's been no conscience. The number of buildings that were all broken by the government for either road expansion or for industrialization. Recently in Chennai, there was a beautiful stone palace, which is one of the best in South India, built in mid-17th century by Shekhawati Bansilal, when he was hired to be the official gold coin minter by the East India Company, not the British, by the East India Company. That guy comes to Chennai, the Madras presidency, and he says, don't expect me to live in the Madrasi homes. I will bring dressed stones from Shekhawati, and I will build my home. So he built a 4-story stone palace, each stone carved very uniquely, such a marvelous palace. Even the grills were carved out of stone, they were not iron. Now this palace got knocked for road expansion. Can you imagine? In 2008. In 2008, the public had to sit quiet and watch it. Each stone was dressed in Shekhawati and transported to Chennai. And when I took them to the court, I lost the case. in Madras. Then I went to Supreme Court. I spent a good 8 lakhs. We lost the case again. Finally, thanks to the judge, when I said I'm going to the press, he called for a negotiation and told the seller, why don't you sell the palace to this gentleman? He will buy only the palace. The land, you do whatever you want. So that was the most expensive fact. So we managed to buy the palace, spending huge sums of money. We brought in about 300 volunteers from the student community, undid the palace, carried it 400 miles away, and rebuilt the palace. Now, is it called for just because I'm passionate, just because I'm a heritage guy, just because I am a heritage hotelier? Is it called for? Not at all. Why should I have this pangs of passion? I think it's high time that the government opens its eyes. One, well, I waited for 40 to 50 years. I've not seen much. I've seen destruction by the hour. Destruction by the hour. What I would like to now see is, I think we still have huge opportunities as heritage hoteliers, not even as owners, as heritage hoteliers, as lovers of Indian heritage, be it natural, be it built, or be it cultural. I think we need to put the best cap that we have, take command, and not expect much from the government, if at all nothing, and start our work at least from now on. We need to start creating museums. I think India has an potential of creating about 1,000 museums. Create museums, protect our heritage, and we need to get aggressive. Each of us take projects and do, instead of trying to see who's responsible or who's to be blamed. I think this is what I would expect for the future, and look forward to being a part of it and start. Imagine the number of festivals that are getting lost. Forget the heritage buildings that are being smashed. Forget the way we are rolling into very sensitive pieces of landscape. I think all that has to be stopped, and you cannot expect the government to do this. I think as heritage lovers, we need to take the leadership, and instead of seeing who's to be blamed, we should say, let's take the responsibility now on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. It is shocking how the heritage properties have been broken by the government. A very sorry story, and your story on rebuilding it is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I'd like to also now welcome Jose Dominic, who's here with us now. Jose is the co-founder of the CJH Earth Group. He's also the vice president of the Indian Heritage Hotels. Jose, who else but you to talk on Kerala, the Kerala story, as you call it?
Thank you, Randir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I just sorry I got late. There was a public consultation which went a little longer with Mr. Tharoor wanting to have framing the manifesto of the party which is in charge. So we were talking exactly the same time we were talking about tourism's role in development. And the Kerala story, as you wanted me to talk about, let me just narrate the story briefly. Kerala is a late starter in tourism. Post-independence, we have had a tumultuous period and marked by when there was red all over Kerala. And at that time, I mean, a big event was the first Communist Party ever in the world to come in through a ballot box came in Kerala. With that, I'm just saying this as part of that investment of the model that Kerala is now here. I remember when I came into the field in 1978, the figure of international arrivals, the share of Kerala was about 1.3% of the total numbers which came to India. Today, that has moved to almost 20%. It's now become a driver of the Kerala economy, creating about 15 lakh jobs and about 11% of our GDP. Okay, so At some time in the past, tourism in Kerala was considered to be in left and left of left governments something of an embarrassment, bourgeois and capitalist. All that has changed. Today, it now has become the biggest job creator and contributor to the economic prosperity of the nation. And 1 in 3 new jobs come from tourism. Now, what is the kind of tourism that Kerala has grown in? At the beginning, we would say that tourism was a dividend, was a result of technology, the wide-bodied aircraft, and cheaper fares for people to travel all over the world. In India, it translated to the first big movements happened Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, the famous Golden Triangle. Then you had in the 80s, you had the foreign enclave called Goa. Kerala came, I think, as a product of the beginning of the early 90s. It was modern India, it was ordinary India, it was village India, it was everyday India. It was a modern aspiration of India. All that Kerala could do was show that every day could be extraordinary or could be magic, and the ordinary could be extraordinary. This is the Kerala story of small entrepreneurs doing what they could, which is small, in a manner which they knew which is local, and yet making world class out of indigenous and local. From this model, now coming to heritage, the role played by heritage in this model. And I think when you talk about heritage, it is strongly connected with responsible tourism. And there cannot be there is a way for tourism which first and foremost must be responsible to the environment, responsible to community, and then, of course, creating excellence in product. And this model of intangible and built and natural heritage is a big endowment that India has and Kerala has. And I would say that India's biggest asset is a cultural diversity. No other country is so well, the diversity has been so well preserved and attended to and distinguished. To which I would just say that India, the USA, for example, is a melting pot. India, on the other hand, is like a thali. Unlike the melting pot where everything is combined to create something different, India preserves everything. Like in a thali, each of our flavors and dishes are kept separately. And when had, it becomes a wholesome meal. That corollary I use to describe what heritage of India could be and the Kerala story. Kerala has now become growing, its dependence on tourism has been immense. And I will also, in this point, when we are in the midst of this crisis of the COVID, talk about resilience. In 2018, Kerala had what we call a once in 100-year event, which was a big flood. Followed that in 2018, quickly followed by that was another kind of virus, which was then the Nipah. And then following that, following that, 2019 again, we had the calamity of floods. With all these calamities, in 2019, October, November, December, January 20th, January 2020, the Tourism Department of Kerala announced figures which showed about figures of earnings and arrivals, which were the highest in our history. Despite those events, calamities, the spring back was that. Now, I'm talking about this in the context of currently the COVID, which I think as a calamity is unprecedented, is unknown in our history. In modern human history, we have not seen a calamity of this gigantic proportion. On the one hand, therefore, it represents not only the calamity also represents an opportunity. Everything is smashed. Enterprises struggle for solvency. People are out of jobs. Nations and Tourism is probably the first hit, the biggest hit, and the longest hit. And we see how the struggle for survival is still there. I would say that in this COVID period, I would divide in three parts. One is BC, that's before COVID, DC during COVID, and hopefully we'll soon have another phase called PC post-COVID. We are in the most difficult time during COVID. And how does tourism can play in lessening the hardship that people are facing? The crisis between life and livelihood is amplified here. In our own sector in Kerala, we can see that the streets, everywhere where you go, you will find people selling chips, selling pickle. You have automobiles with the booths open, people trying to eke out a living because their traditional living has been destroyed hugely. Recently, the Kerala Planning Board had a webinar attended by one of the speakers on that was Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz, and his advice, and he's a frequent visitor to Kerala, I believe, and he said his advice is that Kerala is now dependent upon the fossil fuel economy indirectly by its dependence on remittance by people of Kerala working in the Gulf. It's about time we move out of there and use our own creative and productive capacities and not depend on earning somewhere else. That too can be there. And because the fossil fuel economy, its time is over, and we are now going to shortly, in just a decade's time, going to the renewable fuel economy. So big changes are taking place, but in the midst of this calamity, we need to harness our big asset, which is our heritage. No country, no nation is so abundantly endowed with heritage. We have to use it intelligently. We have got, and here comes the power of enterprise. Heritage is spread all over. Our heritage assets, built and natural, are spread all over. It's there, and all that we need, and then that is an asset which particularly in areas where there is no other industrial activity, no other economic activity possible, except perhaps farming. And the heritage assets which we have can be used as a engine of growth, rejuvenation of rural economies, backward areas, far away India. All of that is what our both built, intangible, and our cultural heritage can be utilized for. So I would think that the need to harness and utilize this asset requires us going forward to have a brave new approach, utilize for heritage, and knowing that the nation's first and biggest priority is jobs, jobs, and jobs. And from that will flow the prosperity that we now and the harmony that we seek. So heritage assets, for which Heritage Hotel Association forms a powerful body in which we are. I think we need to impress upon the decision makers, planners, or to have a policy that will enable us to harness extraordinary assets, have an enabling environment for entrepreneurs to come forward. The linkage of heritage, tourism to farm, linkage to craft, linkage to culture is well known and well appreciated. Here I just take an example that how culture, heritage, and architecture can be so intermeshed. We have in Kerala started in 12-12-12, year, date 12, month 12, year 12, 2012. An event which is called the Kochi Muziris Biennale, biennial, which is now grown to become one of the biggest art shows in the world, drawing people from around the world, artists, modern creativity. And heritage is part of creativity that is taking place at different times in our history. And our historic assets, as I just heard, as I came late, heard Steve talk about the museum. And so immensely endowed that we are. And I'm just coming from, I'm now engaged in working in a part of Kochi called Mattancherry, Jew town, the heritage of Jews who had come here during the time of Chairman Perumal in the year 70 BC, who came here, settled out, were given right to trade, and the only community of Jews anywhere in the world who've never been persecuted. It's an extraordinary story that we have, and in that, and of course, with the formation of Israel, many have returned. Now, that street itself represents a remarkable story of how the country, a nation, a kingdom could welcome and give protection to people, help them to thrive. And these will make wonderful stories of which have a modern purpose, which is an economic and purpose, and which we can show with pride to the world that our what we are and what we are capable of, and just preserving it in its own authentic manner is what we good scientific, good talent, architectural, historic, going back, and all these are available here. We have to apply our minds to it, and
But those we have to
the
get
power of heritage to render to the nation
we have to get
enormous benefit is now abundantly clear. And now, post-COVID, let's hope that sooner than later that we will need to reach out to people. In fact, even at this time of the COVID, we are now trying to. I come from Cochin, show Cochin to Cochinites because others cannot come here, and people who have seen the place can now look at it with new eyes. So
I have one suggestion, if I might interrupt you, Jose, that we should, I think, bank on faith and put all our energies together. We need to gang together so that what you are saying happens at a national level. I think every district needs to have a taste of heritage, so that they realize that it's actually something that brings jobs, that politicians should be interested because it might even bring them votes. And if we are in trouble, like Steve said that he's being harassed, I think we should have a cell in faith, which could take this nationally, because divided we fall. I think we have to gang together so that all the wonderful things that all the people have said, because we are passionate, because we are mad, because we are pioneers, we've done it. But for it to really be upscaled and to make a difference to India, I think we need Randhir and Ashish to talk to each other.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you, Joe.
Let me end with one sentence to respond to Aman. While faith is good, and I think we should use the national bodies such as that, I think our action should begin at bottomless level, at local level, and that will give power, and that is what makes a big difference at the panchayat, at the local municipality, and then going up to the nation, which faith we must get connected from the village to the nation through faith. And of course, I think
perhaps tell us how you can link the villages first. It's a mammoth task. Even the parliament is not successful in gathering our villages together. So shouldn't take on the onus of something which is impossible. Anyway,
thanks, Aman. Thanks, Jose. The Kerala story is fascinating, and how it could not flourish during the time of the left rule, and that now it has been the biggest job creator. With this, I'll just take one last question before we close in, and I'll ask Vinod Daniel, what would be the key components in marketing it successfully. Daniel?
Unmute. Yeah, sorry, I'm just unmuted now. Like I mentioned before, I think the three key aspects is one is, I think everyone's kind of mentioned before, that whatever we want to do in terms of conservation, whether it's buildings or any of the tangible aspects, to get it right, we need some kind of a charter in place that is accepted nationally, just like how many countries have their own charters. Like, for example, Australia has got its Bharat Charter. So you do need an Indian charter that is forms a basis for all the conservation work that we do in terms of built heritage. There's a Venice Charter, but the Venice Charter needs to be adapted somehow to Indian settings. I think number one. Number two is, I think there also needs to be the legal aspect as well as the incentive aspect, so that it becomes worthwhile for people to restore and make sure it is economically viable. The third thing is, you also need skilled human resources in this country. And I think that would automatically flow when the first two things happen. But again, the whole profession of heritage architects and others are very important. Most countries that have done it well do have those professionals in place. And the fourth one, I just want to touch on very briefly what I think everyone else has mentioned before is, in a local community level, the community needs to probably come up front and start discussing on what is important for their local community, so that they would have pride in whatever happens. They are not disconnected from what is happening. We call that cultural mapping. In many countries, in many cities, it's happening. I guess people like Steve have done it very well in Kumbakonam. I'm sure it's happening in certain pockets, but I think we need to make that as part of the system. So that way, when a tourist comes, it's not just a hotel, it's also the whole city. They can spend a day, they can go absorb, what's best in the city. They can spend some money that's useful for the local community. So these are the four key components, I would think.
Thank you, Vinod. To write about culture mapping, that local people need to be involved. It's very, very important. And with this, this session surely has enlightened all of us about the vast potentials of the cultural heritage of this country. With diverse thoughts and experiences shared by experts like Aman Nath, the founder of many heritage properties dating from 14th century to 21st century, and Lakshraj Mewar, a third generation patron of Rajasthan's cultural heritage. We've had the chance to hear views of pioneers of sustainable and responsible tourism like Steve Bogier, and of ecotourism and health and wellness hospital like Jose Dominic. The insight shared by renowned museologist expert like Vinod Daniel and an international expert on India like York Russell are eyes opening, to say the least. It has indeed been a fascinating interaction with many fruitful ideas being shared. Let me end this session in the hope of that these ideas will be implemented in the future. Thank you. Over to Ashish.
Thank you so very much, Randeep, to all your panelists, Aman, Vinod, Steve, Lakshay, York, and Jose. I'm sure all our viewers from around the world and within India, this journey of India is fascinating. The purpose, as you saw during the discussion, is to continue to build tangible milestones with the policymakers to ensure our past becomes our future. And we promise that we will take up all of these points and keep on build a very solid narrative, and we hope for very tangible results. Thank you all panelists for taking our time and for contributing your voice to this cause. Thank you all the viewers for joining in for this module. This is Ashish, Consulting CEO of Faith, and I request you to join in our next module. And you need to click on the next module by exiting this one. Thank you so very much, and thanks again, all the panelists, for taking out your time. Namaste. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you.